It's Hudson to the Rescue on NES Works Gaiden Episode 53.
エントリーナンバー9アメリカ代表ミス・キャラメー
Bandai is back for one final 1985 release for Famicom. And while you may not recognize this title, Obake no Kyutaro, you definitely recognize the game. That's right, it's Chubby Cherub. The American localization of this game a year later would drop the Obake no Kyutaro cartoon license in favor of a lumpy, flying baby. By and large, however, nothing would really change in translation outside of the exchange of a ghost for an angel. As in Chubby Cherub, Obake no Kyutaro straddles a strange divide between platformer and shooter, in which your protagonist can run and jump, but really is meant to fly. Collecting fruit and other snacks will allow you to top up the stamina meter that maintains your flight time, not unlike the system Westone would use a few months later for the Wonder Boy stamina system that would maintain Wonder Boy's existence. In the anime, Kyutaro canonically fears dogs, so your greatest existential threat here comes from puppies that loiter around town. This comes off more disturbingly than I think the developer Tosei intended, since you make your way through cityscapes and countryside alike that appear to be completely abandoned, aside from marauding canines that yip and bark angrily at Kyutaro. What happened to all the humans? Why are they dead? Were they raptured away, leaving behind their pets and assorted fresh fruits? The only sign of human life appears in the form of the various friends that Kyutaro needs to find and rescue at the end of each stage, each drawn in the inimitable Fujio F. Fujiko style. Assuming my post-rapture theory is correct, we can surmise that Kyutaro's ghostly nature likely prevented him from being whisked up to the heavens, while the tarnished nature of his friends' souls damned them to being forever left behind. Anyway, the dogs roam free here in a world mostly abandoned by godan men, idly harassing Kyutaro as he wafts around, but mostly just standing in place and firing off yappy sound effects like some sort of anti-air missile defense system. Kyutaro can defend himself by barking back at them, fighting fire with fire of a sort. As with your protagonist's stamina, his vocal attacks are powered up by collecting sweet treats, in this case, immense rainbow lollipops. Assuming you can angle your way through the relentless vocal attacks by your canine adversaries, you can knock them out of commission by barking at them. Obake no Kyutaro is every bit as middling as you'd expect from a Bandai Tosei team-up to make a hasty buck from a licensed cartoon property. It exists, and its saving grace is that you are not under any sort of legal obligation to play it. Thank God for Hudson. After circling the drain for several episodes, the Famicom library finally gets a much-needed shot in the arm thanks to Hudson, Nintendo's longest-running and most beloved development pal. These both games, unsurprisingly, hail from PC origins, beginning here with the adorable throwback title Binary Land. Originally appearing on MSX in 1984, Binary Land received a facelift for Famicom that neatly reminds you of the fact that Hudson and Nintendo were once good personal friends in these early days, to the point that the third-party publisher's initial wave of titles looked for all the world like first-party releases. From the rounded game title fonts that made up their opening screens, to the particular arrangement of tones and data running along the upper edge of the screen as a scoreboard, Hudson's Famicom titles just gave off an air of Nintendo-ness. And as Binary Land reminds us, they also played a lot like early Nintendo games. That is, they moved smoothly, responded quickly to player inputs, featured crisp visuals and catchy tunes, and presented players with simple gameplay concepts that took a while to truly master. Seeing Binary Land here at the end of 1985, at a point where even Nintendo has begun to scale back on developing games in this mode, offers a handy case-in-point example of the fact that much of the appeal of Nintendo's work in Famicom's formative days had to do with the simple quality that they radiated. Even lacking titles, such as Urban Champion and Ice Climber, demonstrated more capable technical and design prowess than most of the third-party releases that hit the console in the latter half of 1985. Heck, even Hudson themselves have struggled when working with more ambitious concepts like Raid on Bungling Bay and Challenger. But with Nintendo releases, you could be sure that the whole package would feel slick and effortless on a technical level, no matter how dire the actual objectives and concepts involved in something like Robot Block. Binary Land would have felt right at home with the Black Box series in the US, and frankly, I find myself somewhat baffled that Nintendo didn't pick it up for release. Walking a delicate line between puzzle game and maze chase, Binary Land requires players to think laterally in a quite literal way. Here you control not one but two penguins simultaneously, a blue fellow named Gurin and his pink beloved, Malin. I promise that the title does not speak to the creator's determination to uphold a gender binary though. Rather, it references the duality of the characters themselves in mechanical terms. You pick at the game's outset whether you'll control Gurin or Malin, but in truth you have to control both of them together regardless of your selection. See, when you move the character you've selected, their counterpart moves as well in a mirror image of the action you've input. In other words, your character choice determines which of the penguins responds directly to your commands and which moves in the opposite horizontal direction from the one you press. Every input you make causes both penguins to move within the maze, forcing you to keep an eye on both of them simultaneously. All of this points toward a simple objective: to cause them both to meet up at the same time at the goal block dead center at the top of the maze. This is more easily said than done. Few of the mazes feature a perfectly symmetrical layout, so you need to coax the penguins together, even though your inputs may cause one or the other to become caught up in the scenery and walk in place rather than advancing. The obvious path for one character may lead the other into a dead end that forces you to retrace your steps. And even once both characters enter the top row of a maze, it's not simply enough for one or the other to touch the goal. They both have to reach it simultaneously, or else they simply walk past it and each other. Even then, you can't win simply by rewiring your brain to navigate a maze while moving Gurin and Malin around in opposite directions. You also need to avoid hazards, namely a host of spiders that wander the maze and the webs that they've laid down. If one penguin stumbles into a spider, both of your characters lose a life. Webs don't pose quite as much of an immediate danger as the spiders do, in that you won't die if you wander into a web, but you will become trapped and immobilized. The only way to break free from a web is for the other penguin to dart over to your side of the maze and set you free by spraying insecticide that dissolves the web. Well, that or be consumed by a spider that pounces on you while you become trapped, but losing a life like that is not really the way forward to success. Your bug spray can also destroy spiders, although it can be tough in the heat of the moment to remember which way you need to press in order to target a spider as it bears down on you. After all, one of the penguin moves the opposite direction of your inputs, and keeping those directions straight under pressure demands a cool head. Even if you do manage to free a captive penguin, this puts you in an unfavorable situation in which both characters now inhabit the same side of the maze. Depending on the current maze layout, this can lead to a pretty challenging situation in which you need to uncouple the characters and create enough distance between them to get them both to hit their target spots together. Your first impulse might simply be to clear the maze of webs and spiders, but that doesn't always work as well as you'd hope. For starters, as you eradicate the arachnids, the survivors begin to move more quickly, eventually becoming a blur of legs and mandibles that poses a serious threat to both characters, who maintain a more deliberate pace except when temporarily powered up. Worse, each maze has to be completed within a set amount of time, and the timers grow shorter the further you advance, even as the mazes become more intricate. Binary Land, beyond the first few stages, requires quick, efficient, effective play, and by level 10 of the 17 stages here, the difficulty becomes almost overwhelming. The simple combination of winding mazes, crunchy time limits, dual reversed controls, and pesky spiders alone proves more than sufficient to rattle your nerves and force you to develop some real expertise quick. With a simple, appealing concept, precise if tricky controls, and charming, almost retro visuals, Binary Land offers a nice reminder that sometimes less is more. You do have to respect developers who tried to push the Famicom beyond the limits of its basic technology, and sometimes beyond the limits of their programming and design skills. But 1985's new crop of overly elaborate Famicom releases, bogged down by woeful technical deficits and severe cartridge and hardware limitations, can be pretty miserable to revisit nearly 40 years later. Binary Land, on the other hand, is every bit as appealing today as it was at the time of its debut. A strong concept and a lack of overly complicated design goes a long way toward making a great game. And finally, Hudson follows up with Bomberman, a game that feels a lot more at home here in 1985 than it did on NES at the end of 1988 or beginning of 1989 or whatever it was. I don't need to belabor the point with Bomberman since we've seen it very recently in action on NES Works. But as with quite a few titles that would later show up on the US system, Bomberman goes down more easily in the context of its original release. Although it lacks jaw-dropping visuals, The graphics and mechanics stack up nicely against contemporary releases. The two-screen scrolling mazes create spaces that seem quite a bit larger than many of the other maze titles of the era, and the countless little grace notes Hudson added here over the original PC versions of the game do a lot to enhance its appeal. By and large, Bomberman plays faithfully to Bakudan Otoko on MSX, but with more personable graphics. You destroy walls and enemies by laying down bombs that explode in a cross-shaped pattern. Bomberman can permanently upgrade his abilities by extending the range of his explosions and increasing the number of bombs he can lay down at a given time. These powers persist even if you die and have to continue. However, some powers, like the detonator that allows you to choose the timing of each bomb you lay, will reset and need to be found again once you continue. Items, like each level's exit to the next stage, don't appear initially in each maze. Instead, they show up randomly inside destructible walls, meaning that you need to drop bombs not only to ward off foes, but also to simply advance. Improving your attack capabilities makes this process easier, but it also comes with downsides. Once you have the power to drop 5 or 6 bombs whose explosions extend 3 or 4 tiles, you can very easily get sloppy and place bombs in such a way that the first will destroy a wall that contains an upgrade or exit, only for that same tile to become caught in a subsequent blast before you can reach the item that you've revealed. If you bomb an exit or icon, they'll unleash a slew of monsters into the maze that you have to avoid and destroy before you can move on to the next room. Worse, a bomb detonation will destroy an icon, causing you to lose out on whatever new power it would have conferred. This version of Bomberman includes a ton of intricately hidden secrets and bonuses, some of which demand players perform preposterously obscure tasks in order to unearth them. The most advanced bonuses, which appear as effigies of some of the development team, reward players with tens of millions of bonus points, but require you to perform near impossible tasks, like killing all enemies without damaging any walls, or destroying all walls without harming any enemies. These are the sort of requirements that made for perfect magazine fodder and tips shared on playgrounds between friends. The Famicom port does have more going for it than simply impossible new tasks. Programmer Shinichi Nakamoto added half a dozen new enemies to the game world, each of which exhibits different behavior and adds a lot of much-needed variety to the action. Some monsters can pass through walls as they wander mindlessly, while others pursue Bomberman with aggressive fervor. Another nice touch, not only does Bomberman feature a fun little musical ditty as you play, the background tune changes to a more polyphonous melody once you collect the single bonus item in the current stage. It might have been nice if all 50 stages didn't use the same 2 tunes, but the music here is never grating, and the dynamic aspect of it offers a handy real-time clue for the status and objective of the current stage. It's a neat little game. Yeah, the sequels would add a lot of life to the concept by introducing multiplayer, but by my count, it would take a baffling 5 years for the first of those to arrive. A PC Engine update that incorporated multiplayer. Well, better late than never, I suppose. Much like Hudson's redemptive appearance here on Famicom at the end of 1985. Imagine how much worse this platform's library could have seemed at the time without Hudson. Next time we bring it on home and close out 1985.